Hi everyone, welcome back. Well, we finally have all of the details for the very long-awaited 2025 UK budget. In this video, I'm not going to go through every tweak that's been made, every headline. Instead, I'm going to focus on the changes that have the most impact for your retirement. And I'm going to divide it into two sections. The impact for those of you who have not yet retired, and in the second part, the impact for those of you who have retired. Some of them will overlap, of course. Pretty much every change that's been announced will impact you to some degree, but some of the changes will have more of an impact for your retirement, particularly over the course of 20 or 30 years. Before we go through the detail, if you are new here, my name is Dianne. I'm a financial coach and I support people with their money and life goals, and particularly with retirement planning. Number one, if you are still planning to retire. If you are still working and hoping to retire at some point, the changes that you can see on the screen right now are the top three that I think will impact you the most. Let's go through each of them in turn. The further freezing of tax thresholds. The budget confirms that the already frozen tax thresholds, they've been frozen for quite some time, are further frozen for another 3 years out to financial year ending in April 2031. So the personal allowance beneath which you pay no tax remains at £12,570, and then you pay the basic rate of 20% on income between £12,570 up to £50,270, and beyond that you pay 40% tax. The higher rate and additional rate thresholds also stay in place too, as does the £100,000 so-called cliff edge threshold, after which your personal allowance tapers away. I'm sure that all of you watching are aware that this is a stealth tax. If you're working as your salary increases, or if you're not working as your state pension increases and perhaps you're taking a greater income from your defined contribution pension, or your defined benefit pension is index linked as well and that's increasing, there's more and more of a chance that you get dragged into other tax bands. The Office for Budget Responsibility says that this freezing of the income tax thresholds is the single biggest revenue generator for the government of all of the changes that they have made today. Salary sacrifice clampdown, the real impact. The other big change that impacts you if you are still working, this one is more of a technical change but with very real consequences, is the changes to salary sacrifice. Currently, contributions coming from both you and your employer into your pension via salary sacrifice are exempt from national insurance contributions. As of 2029, there will be a cap of £2,000. Any contributions above that will be liable for full national insurance at whatever your marginal rate is. Let's go through a real-life example for somebody earning £75,000 gross and making £10,000 a year contribution into their pension. Right now, that's £10,000 that's sacrificed before income tax and national insurance is payable. Currently, somebody making that contribution on that level of salary would save £200 a year in national insurance. On the employer side, with employer national insurance at 15%, and many employers effectively recycle that saving back to their employees, and that could be through an increased matching of your contributions above the minimum that they're obliged to contribute of 3%. The savings from the employee side are on the screen right now, but on the employer side, that's an additional national insurance charge of around £1,200 per year for somebody making that level of contribution. Multiply this across the entire workforce for all the companies in the UK, for every company that is making salary sacrifice. You can see how the OBR is stating that this will raise billions for the Chancellor. But will employers become less generous? This is the reality, the uncomfortable consequence of this change, because those of you who are currently working for a company who pay above the minimum requirement of 3%, maybe they're currently matching your contributions up to 5% or perhaps even higher, those companies, as I've gone through, will no longer be saving national insurance on their employer contribution. Will that result in them deciding to make their contribution less generous and perhaps fall back to the minimum that they have to contribute, which is 3%, which will have a real impact on your pension contributions over time. Because very simply, say for example right now, your combined contribution to your pension is 10%, 5% from you, 5% from your employer. And if as a result, your employer reduces their contribution to 3%, well, the obvious maths is that you have to make up your contribution in order for your overall pension to be growing by the same amount per year, or you'd have to work for a few years longer in order to get the same pot size. Now, of course, we don't know how companies are going to react to this yet, but my guess is that this will have a real impact for the smaller companies where the tax implication will have the biggest impact. Some of the better employers will perhaps swallow the cost and maintain their level of matching for you, but it's definitely a risk that I would be building into your longer term planning right now. The final point that I want to emphasize on this salary sacrifice change is that if you are saving and contributing and investing towards your retirement, and the major part of your contribution is through salary sacrifice through an employer, then this change shouldn't stop you from saving, but it does change the maths. It changes the maths on the tax efficiency, particularly if you are in the private sector and you are relying on a defined contribution pension for your retirement. ISA changes, especially cash ISAs, and a possible obvious workaround. So the much rumoured changes to cash ISAs have in fact been announced today. So if you were using ISA for part of your retirement planning, your retirement saving, then you can still contribute £20,000 a year. Interestingly, the rules don't apply to anyone over the age of 65. We don't have the full implementation details about these ISA changes yet. The small print over the next few weeks and months will be really important, and I'll come back to this at a later date when we get clarity on the implementation of the ISA changes. But based on the announcement that's been made today, there's the very obvious workaround. Well, actually, I can think of two workarounds. The first workaround is that if you want to use your full £20,000 allowance, and that means that you would be saving into a stocks and shares ISA, well, you can use money market funds, which are not without some degree of risk. It's not exactly the same as cash, but money market funds are a close cash equivalent. And so that's one relatively straightforward potential workaround. But the other workaround, which would perhaps be more appealing for those of you that prefer to keep all of your ISA savings within a cash ISA, is to periodically transfer from a stocks and shares ISA into a cash ISA. And if you do that once a year and you transfer £20,000 that you've saved in the previous tax year, that's your full cash allowance, unless there are some restrictions made for transfers between stocks and shares ISAs and cash ISAs in the future. These sorts of details, these implementation details, aren't typically announced in the budget, of course. The detail comes out over the coming weeks, as I've said. But if the rules remain as they are today for transfers, then there's nothing stopping you paying your £20,000 into a stocks and shares ISA in one financial year, keeping it in low-risk money market funds, and then transferring the full £20,000 over into a cash ISA. It's a little bit clunky, involves a little bit of admin, but it's a way of maintaining your full £20,000 cash ISA allowance. Let's see if that loophole is somehow closed in the implementation, if you are already retired. Okay, so let's move on to the changes that have been announced today that will impact you if you are already retired. Whether you are below or above state pension age, if you are retired, you will also feel the impact of the tax freeze, the impact of the fiscal drag. The state pension for the financial year ending April 26 is £11,973 a year. And prior to the budget, we already know that for the following financial year, this will increase by 4.8%. And there have been no changes announced to the triple lock today. That remains in place. So from April 2026, the state pension will be £12,548 per year. Now, this is the new state pension. I appreciate that many of you watching who are already retired will not be on the full new state pension. But for those of you who are, it will be £12,548 per year from April 2026, which is really close to the top of the personal allowance threshold of £12,570. And so we can be certain for the following financial year, the financial year ending in April 2028, even with the lower of the triple lock increases, which is 2.5%, it will go over the personal allowance limit. So that means that for everyone on the full new state pension from April 2028, you will be paying tax on it. In the budget announcement today, the Chancellor made reference to the HMRC administrative changes that will be implemented as a result of the fact that the full new state pension is now going over the personal allowance limit, well, as of April 2028. Currently, the state pension is paid to everyone gross. There is no tax deducted at source. If you have other taxable pension income on top of the state pension, then HMRC sets your tax code in accordance with the total amount of taxable income that you receive. The state pension alone, the state pension itself, is at the moment technically not subject to taxation. It's not taxed at source. You get the full amount irrespective of what your overall income is, and then your total tax bill is adjusted accordingly. For anyone who receives nothing else other than the state pension, you will in future be paying income tax, whereas you weren't before. What would currently happen if your sole income is just the state pension? You get paid that in full, and then you don't have to do a full self-assessment. Instead, HMRC sends you something called a simple assessment, and that's a tax bill based on the information that they may already have about you. So what the Chancellor appeared to announce today is the removal of this simple assessment requirement for anyone who is only on the state pension. What I presume will happen, and there is a live policy debate ongoing about this, is that the state pension will eventually have its own PAYE system so that it can be taxed at source like your other pension income. Tax and pension bodies have been arguing for this for quite some time because it is quite a ludicrous situation where the state pension is given in full and then subsequently taken back because it's over the personal allowance. This budget strengthens the case for having a proper which pot do I spend first analysis prior to your retirement or even during it. And that's mixing your pensions, ISAs and any other savings, any other sources of income that you have in the most tax efficient way possible so that you don't get inadvertently dragged into a higher tax threshold. Doing that kind of analysis becomes more important than ever. It already was important, but now that we're having the prolonged fiscal drag, it becomes even more important. Pulling this all together, what I'd be thinking about next. If you are still planning to retire, review how you are using salary sacrifice, especially if you are in the fortunate position of your gross salary being over £100,000. What do these changes mean for you in terms of your net pay versus pension contribution equation? And if you were lucky to have a generous employer, keep a careful watch on what they might do as a result. If you do currently enjoy generous matching, unfortunately, you can't assume that that will necessarily stay in place, particularly when your employer does an analysis on how much that ongoing generous contribution will cost them due to the increased cost of national insurance tax on them. If you are already retired, then the freeze on the tax thresholds will have the biggest impact for you. If you are receiving your state pension, then you don't need to panic about needing to do a full self-assessment, and changes will hopefully be in place, which will mean that you won't have messy tax admin, any tax admin at all, at the point in time in not too many years where the state pension alone will be taxed. Make the most of your ISAs and any remaining tax-free cash that you have available that you might have originally taken from your pension in order to carefully manage how much taxable income you take each year. In future videos, I will go into further detail as we get the implementation details, so watch out for those. Thank you so much to all existing subscribers. If you are not, the YouTube algorithm is so helpful because once you've watched one of my videos, it keeps presenting you with them, irrespective of whether or not you've clicked that subscribe button. But it really helps me out if you take a second to find out wherever it is on whatever device you're watching me on. It really helps me grow the channel. It's completely free. Thank you so much. Until next time, Hol var tro.